If you'd like to learn how to draw mandala art for beginners, today I will be sharing a simple mandala drawing as day seven of our 30-day art challenge. So if you're just now joining us, my name is Cynthia with Mindful Creative Muse. We share creative and calming practices to help you de-stress and make art at home. And you can download the free calendar in the description box below if you're just now joining us. And we will be using really simple mandala drawing art practices today. Very simple supplies. I'm a minimalist at heart and I love minimalist art. And so when you're ready, we will dive right in. All you need is a journal and a pen. For my simple mandala drawings, I like to just grab a plate or a bowl or something that I can trace around to make a nice circular shape. If you happen to have a protractor or a compass, you can always use that as well. I always mix up those two. If someone knows, you can comment below and say if it's a protractor or a compass. That would be amazing. I always say I'm going to Google it and I don't. So today we'll be doing that really simple mandala drawing activity. And what I love about this, similar to any of our other mindful art activities, is that they can be done in 5 minutes or 2 minutes to begin or end your day. And so today's prompt is rising. And I must be on a water theme right now because what came to mind, perhaps because of the underwater painting, watercolor painting we did yesterday, that's still fresh in my mind. So you might notice that as you come to your 30-day art challenge, that something you do one day might build and repeat or cause similar symbols or media or approaches to happen with your work. So all I'm doing right now is creating really simple lines, and I'm thinking of just sort of ocean waves. I'm thinking of that rise, that motion and fluidity. But again, this is a prompt. It can be used in any way you'd like to think of it, so whatever works for you. So we're using really simple art materials. I am a huge fan of minimalist art and of art that we can do really simply, like the 5-minute mindful art activities, as a way that we can de-stress and just give ourselves a little bit of space in our day. So I'm using just my art journal here as well as a micron pen. And as usual with any of our 30-day art challenge videos, I will always have the art supplies link down below. So one thing I do anytime I'm drawing in my journal, and this is largely connected to mindful art practices and meditative art, is I am always checking back in with how I'm feeling as I make marks. I'm noticing the sounds as they move across the page. I'm noticing any thoughts I might have, especially if I have any critical thoughts about any marks I'm making, just noticing that and then letting that go again. And then I'm just returning back to my practice. So that's a constant sort of process as I do meditative art. And for me, it becomes a bit more natural as time goes on. Many of my students mention that as well. And it's definitely not, everything I mention is an invitation or a suggestion. And I notice that for me, because a lot of these practices can be really de-stressing, that I find them more calming and more nurturing when I can be present with what's coming up in the moment. And that often is being present with my breath, being present with my body, being present with my thoughts as I make marks. And it's a way to have meditation time, have quiet check-in time with myself without it being so formal or forced. And it can be really joyful just as I'm making mindful doodles or these mindful mandalas that I like to call them. So what I'm doing right now, if I'm going to bring this a little bit closer, you'll see me do this in some of the other videos as well. I'm just coming into some of the lines here, and I'm going to start to fill in and play. So that's one of the mark making techniques that I enjoy that's really simple. And I've mentioned this, I think, in some of the other videos, but I do have a Pinterest board that can help inspire you that I'll link down below as far as mark making ideas. And then of course, any of my courses, I go into much more depth about different practices and techniques. So this is one that seems to be coming up lately for me. So when I mentioned you might notice similarities or symbolisms or the same practices coming up in your mindful art journal or while you're doing the 30-day art challenge, that's something to just notice. What marks are you making in your art journal that seem to be repeating themselves, that you notice bring you joy when you make them? Like you just have this curiosity that you keep going back and making those types of marks. I find that really fascinating. And I notice for myself and for my students that those will continue to change over time. And so it's just nice to witness that. And sometimes what I also notice and what I encourage for my students is that if you begin to notice certain symbols, just by kind of setting the intention that you're going to start paying attention to that, it helps you be more engaged and connected with the marks you're making, with the process, with being really present. And I feel like for me, it just sparks some curiosity. Drawing, I don't know about you, but when I was a little girl, I would constantly draw and I would collect rocks and I would just be so curious about the world around me, about what I could create and what I could find. And so much about this work, about 5-minute mindful art activities, about doing a daily 30-day art challenge where you're giving yourself space to create and tend to yourself, is another way I see it as a gift of how you can tend to your inner child, how we can be there for ourselves in another way that feels really nurturing and playful and lighthearted. And many of the mindful art activities that I share in some of my courses as well, they do go deeper. So sometimes it's a way that we can be with really difficult things. It's a way that we can be with grief, that we can express ourselves through really difficult things that we're holding. So it can be all of those things. And it begins with that awareness, that just giving ourselves space and time. And what I notice and what I love, especially about this 30-day art challenge, is by having a structure. So setting an intention, like for 5 minutes every day for 30 days, I'm just going to make something in my mindful art journal. And you might use the prompts in the calendar. You might stray from that. But having that intention, there's a study actually where they say that you're 70% more likely to reach a goal if you have a specific intention and if you share that with somebody else and you have some accountability. And so definitely, if you've been following along and you haven't commented yet, or even if you have, I highly encourage you, definitely comment and join the conversation and connect with other students and other creatives and artists here as a way to help you stay on the path, stay on this intention of creating every day. And just being curious about what happens, like how do I feel during the 30-day process? How do I feel after the 30-day process? You know, it can be a really interesting experiment, whether you're new to a mindful art journal practice, whether you've been doing mindful doodles for years or watercolors, however you're coming to this practice, whether it's brand new or you've been doing it for a long time. Even if you've had a consistent creative practice daily, but now you have a slightly different structure with this 30-day art challenge, wherever you are, however you're coming to this, it can just be interesting to notice where you were before we began the journey and what potentially is shifting for you, what you're finding nurturing for your self-care. And also, I think to hold it a little lightly. So sometimes, regardless of how much we would love to make something, even for 5 minutes to help us de-stress and be present, sometimes the day gets away from us, life gets away from us. We have really, really hard days. And even if we would love to do that, sometimes it doesn't happen. And so whether you're doing the 30-day challenge every day, whether you just discovered it, whether you're watching them and you haven't started in your art journal practice yet, just I love to give myself and to remind my students that we have permission for it to be our own experience, for it to be whatever we need in this moment, and trusting ourselves the most to know, today this is the thing that's going to feel most nourishing for me. And I think that's largely what it comes back to, and why I'm so passionate about mindful art practices, is how can this be nourishing and supportive for us? That's really the ultimate goal. There's lots of reasons, but that's really a huge benefit. So I think I'm going to continue this just for another minute or so, making some last marks. You might want to pause the recording once I finish up this if you'd like more time, or you can also start to think about what can you wrap up here with your mindful doodle, here with your simple mandala drawing if you're following along. What are some of the final marks you can make, and always knowing you can come back to it later. So the other thing I want to say too about this really simple mandala art practice is that it's really fun to go back in later as well. If you use watercolors or colored pencils or markers, and you can go back in later and fill in colors, and it can completely change this image and your connection and what you want to draw and pull out. So I will probably play with this a little bit later. I might save it for another day. I'll see what the prompts are for the 30-day mindful art challenge. So I just wanted to mention that as a suggestion. And I will link also my mindful mandalas. I have several videos on YouTube already about my mindful mandalas practice, and I have a mindful mandalas e-course where I go into more details, and not just about pattern warm-ups and the actual process and different marks, but a really powerful I am affirmation statement process and journaling process. And what's so interesting, I'm just going to finish this one mark here, is I had a dream last night about affirmations. I actually came up with a positive affirmation in my dream. And it's one of those things where I woke up in the morning and I was like, oh, I'm going to write that down. And of course I didn't. And of course I've forgotten. But I can't say that I remember ever having a dream where I came up with a powerful, affirming, empowering affirmation statement. I just found that so moving when I woke up. So I don't know if any of you have had really powerful dreams about anything similar to that. If you have, I'd love to hear about it in the comments, just because I was so fascinated by it. So anyways, there's lots of different ways you can do affirmations. My process specifically will draw out information and make meaning of the marks that you've made on the page, to then give you words and ways that you can create the affirmation statement. So it's a direct reflection of your image and of what you're feeling in that moment. So it's one of my favorite processes. So I share that in my course. And so that's something that is always optional that you can do later. But for now, I'm going to finish this one last mark and then come back to you on the other screen. As usual, I hope you found that nurturing and supportive. Again, we can do these really simple mandala art practices or minimalist art or 5-minute mindful art activities very quickly throughout our day as a way to give us some space to reconnect, just notice our breath, make some marks, and de-stress. Anybody can do it, and that's why I love these practices. You don't need to be an experienced artist, and if you are an experienced artist, you can still get something out of these practices. So I would love, love, love to hear in the comments, as I mentioned in the video, if you have any positive affirmations that have been coming to you that you've been using lately, or that help empower and uplift you, please share them in comments. We can help support each other and inspire each other. Also, if you've started to notice something that you keep feeling drawn to, since we're a week now into the 30-day art challenge, if you notice certain symbols or marks or materials that you find yourself drawn to again and again, or colors or textures, definitely comment about that below as well. it's a way to just kind of notice, make note to yourself, and then again, getting interactive and sharing in the comments below, I really believe will help us all stay together and create during these 30 days. So if you are ready, I think you might enjoy these other videos that are connected to mindful mandalas and simple mandala drawing. So you can definitely check those out. And then I will see you tomorrow for our next day of our 30-day art challenge.